Um, so reliable agentic analytics requires a couple of things. It requires a really, really solid data foundation, and I'll try and unpack um, what that entails. And it requires great context around that data. Um, so let me start with the context actually, because that's the sort of thing that people are spending more time in the industry talking about at the moment, and then work back to the data foundation. So when people talk about AI in general, it's becoming better and better understood that AI really depends on context. When you're working with an LLM, the full context that you provide it on any question or request that it's working on is really critical. And the better the context, the more precise that context is, the more relevant that context is, the easier it is for the LLM to reason and give the user back a response that is helpful and is accurate. And if you think about the kind of context that's relevant in a business, for a data agent to be successful and useful, it needs all the same context that a human data analyst or human data scientist would need to be successful. So, human data analysts or human data scientists don't just answer questions from business people. They understand the context of the business model, how that business functions, how that business generates revenue, what those business costs are, what drives value in the business, how they're positioned in market, what makes them competitive. It understands the market environment, and context, the customer context, and then they understand the internal politics, and all of that is helpful information to understand when a business user asks a question, what are they really trying to get at? And a good data analyst, a good data scientist will often challenge the business user to say, "Hey, look, you're asking for this, but why do you really want to understand that?" And through following processes like five whys, they get actually under the skin of what the problem is that business user is really trying to understand. And that's one type of context, really the context of the question that's being asked. But then there's a ton of context that human analyst needs to understand about the data if they're going to bring the data to bear to help solve the problem that the business user specified. And so they need to understand, what is this data? They need to understand how it was generated, where it was generated, because that's often critical to understand what the data means, but also what the limitations are of the data, where the data's stored, how it's structured. That's important if they're going to write queries to effectively take that data and turn it into a format that then means they can understand the question. So there's context about the business and the environment that the business functions in and how it creates value and how the business functions internally. And then there's context around the data. And a good human analyst will pull this all together and use it when they're doing an analysis to make sure that the analysis they're doing is technically correct. And then they're presenting the output of that analysis to the different people in the business in a politically sensitive way that maximizes the chance that the insight that they've driven is going to move the business for the better. And so this idea of context is something that anybody who's worked in data is super familiar with. And we shouldn't be surprised, and this is what we're finding, is that data agents need exactly that same context that a human analyst needs to be successful, the data agent needs. And so providing agents with that context is one of the things that's required. But related to that, the other thing that data agents need is a solid data foundation. They need to know exactly what data is available. They need to know where it's come from and how it's been processed, who owns what data. They need to understand how that data has been used historically, what data can be relied on, what data can't be relied on. how the data is structured, so that given a question, an agent can reason about which parts of the data can be used to solve that question, which parts of the question there is data or there isn't data that they can bring to bear. Um, um, and then the agent has to be able to rely on that data. An agent doesn't want to have to go and chase 15 different people to find out what some random numbers in a bucket and blob storage somewhere mean. They want to know exactly sort of line for line what that data means, to what extent that data can be trusted, how that data has been used, and take it from there. So the two things that an agent needs is that data foundation um, and that context.